The light never changed. It was always the same thin, distant white, filtered through cracked composite and a dusted viewport. It had no warmth to it, no direction, no shadows. It was just there. If there were days, he could not see them. If there were nights, they never came. The escape pod drifted without rotation, without thrust, without purpose. Somewhere inside its sealed shell, a single human body continued to breathe, slow and shallow, surrounded by systems that had been pared down to the bare minimum of survival. Everything else was dark. He had shut it all down himself. Navigation, comms, diagnostics, external sensors, environmental balancing, even the internal clock, especially the clock. He remembered hovering his finger over that control for a long time, knowing exactly what it would give him, and knowing exactly what it would take away. Knowing how long he had been drifting would not help him live longer. It would only tell him how long he had been dying. So he left it dark. His mouth felt like paper. No, worse than paper. Like dust. Like old fabric. Like something that had forgotten what water was. He swallowed out of habit more than need. There was nothing there to swallow. No saliva. No relief. Just the faint movement of muscles trying to remember how they used to work. Hunger had passed days ago. Weeks ago, maybe. He wasn't sure. Hunger was sharp. This wasn't sharp anymore. This was dull, constant, heavy, like gravity inside his bones. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he thought he slept. Sometimes he stared at the same point on the viewport for what felt like minutes, and later realized it might have been hours, or days, or nothing at all. Thoughts came apart easily now. They drifted like debris, a memory of his unit, a face, a voice. Static, a half-remembered joke. Darkness. He tried not to think about the ship. He failed. The worst part was a horror that only minutes had passed, and still had an eternity left of this slow decline. There was no choice left. Not even the wrong one. Sometimes, in the darkest parts of the viewport, he thought he saw something move, not against the stars, not against the distant haze, only where there was nothing, where light failed completely, a distortion, a thinning, like space itself had forgotten how to behave. At first, he ignored it. Hallucinations were expected. Everyone knew that. Dehydration did that. Starvation did that. Loneliness did that. But it kept coming back. Never in the same place. Never for long. A faint curve of motion. Like a sea creature swimming through space. A suggestion of presence. He remembered the stories. Every spacer did. Wraiths, seen near wrecks, near battlefields, near drifting bodies, never recorded, never measured, never proven, always dismissed. They were supposed to be omens, or parasites, or artifacts of dying brains, depending on who you asked. He watched one for a long time, or thought he did. It circled his pod slowly, 3 times, no reflection, no physical signs it was really there, except that faint glow, easily lost if the background lightened too much. Movements like swimming, then it drifted away, dissolved into darkness. Moments later, he saw the light. And later, when the ship appeared, he wondered if the two were connected, if it had fled the approaching vessel, or if it had finished with him. He did not know which answer frightened him more. The light changed, not in color, not in intensity, in position. At first, he thought it was another hallucination, another trick of oxygen deprivation and dehydration and fatigue, the kind that painted movement where none existed. But it moved again, slow, deliberate, against the background, geometry emerging from noise. His breathing hitched, just once, then steadied. Because hope was dangerous. Hope burned power. The object grew, a shape resolving, angles, panels, non-reflective hull plating, no visible insignia, no weapon mounts, no beacon. His mind struggled to place it. Then memory surfaced, unwanted, uninvited. Collectors. The ship's hull and configuration unmistakable. No one else would drive a ship like that and risk being mistaken for one of them. Clean, white, various round tubes connected around a central larger tube. Old cargo hauler converted it current form. The word came with other words. Scavengers, grave takers, data thieves, eaters of the dead. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. Ships that arrived after disasters. Ships that left with bodies. Ships that never explained. In his state, the stories expanded, twisted, grew teeth. They won't save you, whispered something in his mind. They'll take you. He tried to reach for the emergency transmitter, stopped. There was no point. If they were here, they already knew. If they meant harm, resistance was a gesture, not a defense. He let his hand fall. A drone detached silently. A small, symmetrical craft, unfolding as it moved. Micro-thrusters fired in precise bursts. No turbulence, no sudden acceleration, no violent docking. It matched velocity first. Perfectly. Then it approached. Slow, gentle. Magnetic fields aligned. Pressure seals formed. The pod did not jolt. It did not shake. Nothing inside him was crushed. Nothing ruptured. Nothing screamed. The drone embraced the pod and held. Through the narrowing haze, he thought he saw other drones moving past. Not toward shattered weapon racks, not toward drifting cargo, toward shapes, toward pods, toward still forms outlined in faint lights. Relief came late, and all at once. His vision tunneled, the edges darkened. His muscles finally released their tension. He felt himself slipping and did not fight it. When he opened his eyes, he was warm. That was the first thing he noticed. Not hot, not cold. Warm. Like sunlight through fabric. Like remembered afternoons. He lay on something soft. Not a crash couch. Not metal. Not restraint foam. A surface that yielded. A surface meant for living bodies. A woman sat beside him. Dark hair pulled back loosely. A short tunic and soft pants, neat and clean, patterned in light browns and greens. Unremarkable in cut, but nice in color and pattern. Her expression was tired, young, around his age, kind. "You're safe," she said quietly. Her voice was real. He knew because it wasn't perfect. "I was found like you," she continued, in a pod, drifting. "I'm Catalan." "Cat." "Kian," he croaked. He swallowed. Pain flared. "How long?" "You, best we can tell. 2 weeks." She shook her head gently. Don't worry about that yet. After a pause, she added, Mine was a little longer. She didn't explain. The door opened. Someone entered. Slender. A tall figure in long, light-colored robes, a loose cowl around its head. Humanoid. Terran-shaped, maybe, but wrapped in enough cloth to be anything. Was this a collector? It didn't fit the stories, but he didn't know anyone who had actually seen one. It inclined its head slightly. Aina, it said softly. The woman flinched. Just a little. So fast he almost missed it. Then she nodded. I'm here, she replied. His gaze drifted past them, through a transparent partition, to another bay, another pod. Recently secured, its hull scorched, its surface cracked. And through the viewing panel, blue-gray fur, elongated features, too angular. Hrithi. His breath caught. That couldn't be right. They didn't rescue Hrithi. Not in contested space. Not ever. Terrans and Hrithi barely tolerated each other and had just destroyed each other's ships in this sector. Wars had started over less. He closed his eyes, then opened them again. He looked at the other pod, at the cracked hull, at the still form inside. Someone who had almost died the same way he had. They had saved them both. No sides, no questions. Just life. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, very softly, he said, Cat? She looked at him. What now? Not about the ship. Not about recovery. Not about tomorrow. The big now. The one that came after you weren't supposed to be here anymore. She considered him carefully. You've been given a gift, she said. A life you weren't promised. Reborn into possibility. So the question isn't what now. It's who you want to be. And how you want to be seen. Nearby machines hummed steadily, and Kat, Aina, was watching over him, and for the first time in longer than he could remember. Time had started moving again. It was another day before Kian could get enough fluids and food into his system. He didn't need more sleep, but his body did. So he drifted in and out for another full day, consciousness coming and going in shallow waves. When he finally woke again, his head was clearer than it had been in over a week. The difference was enough to unsettle him, enough to make him question everything he thought he remembered from the past few weeks. It felt less like surviving near death and more like waking from a dream. The Hrithi attack felt more like a distant story than something real. He found a set of basic ship coveralls hanging on a hook inside his small compartment. Clean, folded, waiting. As he pulled them on, he made a point not to think about what his own clothes must have looked like after weeks inside an escape pod. He noticed the small, round port window, stars beyond, and the compartment itself, soft colors, tans and greens, muted light, comforting. His bed was real, not a crash couch, not a restraint, a bed. There was a small padded chair beside it where Kat had sat before. Everything was simple, basic, comfortable, deliberately so. After a while, he stepped out into the corridor. He wandered, no destination, just searching for something familiar, anything. Eventually, he reached the main cargo bay. It was busy. A dozen robed figures moved quietly between rows of escape pods, Each pod was being opened, examined, stabilized. Others knelt beside forms laid out on the deck. White blankets covered them, different shapes, different sizes. Still, bodies. Dead bodies, Terrans. Hrithi. Collectors worked among them all, attaching instruments, scanning, recording, adjusting, tending to pods and corpses alike with the same careful precision, with the same reverence. Kian stood frozen. Behind him, a voice spoke. "It's what they do." He spun. Kat stood there, hands folded loosely in front of her. "What? What do they do?" he asked, still staring. She followed his gaze. "Yes," she said quietly. "They tend to the dead." She said it as if it were the most normal thing in the universe. It's their belief that dying alone in space is the gravest thing that can happen to someone. Kian swallowed. "What are they going to do with them?" he asked carefully. Kat didn't hesitate. "Eat them, probably," she said seriously. "Easiest way to dispose of them." He stared at her in horror. Half of him believed her. The stories rushed back. Then she broke. She laughed, soft at first. Then harder, hand over her mouth, barely containing it. "You are so gullible," she managed. "Of course they're not going to eat them." She sobered. "They're going to take them home." She said it with quiet respect. "They're still searching for the data cores from the Terran and Hrithi ships," she continued, "so they can identify everyone, so they know where they belong." She looked at him. "And you two can probably help." "Us two?" Kian asked. "You and the Hrithi," she said. "You knew many of them, didn't you?" He hesitated. "You mean identify the bodies?" Kat nodded. "And tell them what you know." She leaned slightly, head tilted, studying him. "If you leave that open like that," she said lightly, "something's going to fly in." Kian blinked. Realized his mouth was hanging open. He closed it quickly. Then glanced around as if expecting insects in the air. Kat made a soft sound and shook her head. "Follow me." They moved down a corridor together. Ahead, he heard unfamiliar sounds. Clicking. Then low, wispy tones. As they turned the corner, he saw the Hrithi. 4 legs supported its thorax. An abdomen extended behind. It had blue fur along most of its body, with neat, clear black patterns along its back and abdomen and banding along its leg joints and pedipalps. It held its 4 arms raised. Its 4-eyed head faced a robed collector. Kian started forward instinctively, ready to intervene. Then the collector's cowl slipped back. He saw the smile, not strained, not forced, genuine, almost joyful. Kian stopped. The Hrithi moved carefully. Its feet lifted and lowered in small, precise motions, almost like tiptoeing. Its head swayed gently side to side, arms still raised. The robed figure mirrored the movements, then stepped closer and gently patted one of its arms. The Hrithi relaxed instantly, arms lowered, feet stilled, its posture softened. Then it noticed Kat and Kian. It turned, arms shot back up, feet resumed their careful motions. Head swayed again. It looked almost comical, but there was tension beneath it. The collector whispered softly, continued patting its arm. The Hrithi calmed, lowered its arms. The collector smiled again. "Ina," he said, then looked at Kian. "Kian," Kian replied. The collector nodded. Kian. Then he tilted his head slightly and repeated the wispy sound. Whisper, Cat translated. In Terran. She smiled. Whisper. Nice to meet you. Kian nodded awkwardly. Cat turned to him. Each tender, she said quietly, gesturing to the robed figure, specializes in a species, in how to return their people after death. She pointed gently. Tender Rail is responsible for the Hrithi. As they settled into what came next, an alarm sounded. Red lights flooded the corridor. Rail's head snapped up. He gestured to Cat. She nodded. Come with me, she said, pointing to Kian and Whisper. They moved quickly upward toward the bridge. At the controls, another tender spoke softly. A Kreth vessel is approaching. His voice was calm. It is broadcasting a warning. We are to leave or be hunted. Cat studied the display. They are ravagers and hunters, she said. They will kill if it's convenient. Then she looked to the command chair. She gestured. The tender rose and bowed. Ina! She took the seat. She made a low sound toward Whisper. He rotated his pedipalps in a slow circle, clicking softly, then moved to a sensor console. All crew, Cat said evenly. Brace for evasive maneuvers in 5 minutes. Kreth incoming. Kian strapped himself in. Cat set a countdown. Prepare to jump toward the nearest gate. If we stay ahead of their scans, she said to him quietly, they probably won't pursue. That's about as fair a warning as Kreth ever give. The ship shuddered as inertial dampers pushed toward their limits. When the timer hit 0, Cat executed. Everyone was slammed back into their seats. Acceleration was brutal. Whisper chittered sharply. Rail translated. They're diverting to the wreckage. One small craft is separating. It's faster than us. Cat exhaled. So they want a piece of us anyway. Rail added, it will intercept before the gate. Any weapons on board? Kian asked. Whisper echoed the question in clicks. Rail hesitated. Possibly. Confiscated from pods in the cargo bay. Kian stood. Rail slid into his seat. Kian and Whisper ran. They could hear Cat's voice rising in the background, sharp and commanding. In the cargo hold, they found an energy rifle, then a Hrithi weapon. They reached the airlock. Waited. The ship bucked violently. Metal groaned. Impact struck the hull. Then silence. A shadow crossed the viewport. A scarred red and gray hull slid into place. Clank. Docking clamps. Kian took cover. Whisper leapt, flipped, gripped the ceiling, and took cover in a recessed panel. Shadows danced in the viewport, and the airlock cycled. 2 Kreth stepped through. Massive, armored, coarse fur, yellow eyes, vertical pupils. The 2 Kreth paused just inside the corridor. One sniffed the air slowly. Its ears twitched. It made a low, rumbling sound. Almost pleased. The other replied with a short bark of laughter. Kian didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were isolating prey. Guttural, growling speech crossed between them. They laughed, a wet, ugly sound, and opened fire. Kian was their focus, the first to be spotted. Shots scorched the walls as he ducked back. Whisper aimed and fired. The shot struck with a dull grunt, and the Kreth fell. The second turned and aimed at Whisper. Kian shot, Twice, it dropped. Silence. They advanced carefully. The boarding craft was empty. But the smell. Rot. Blood. Chemical decay. Worse than anything Kian remembered. They sealed it. Left it. Kat met them outside the airlock. Two tenders hurried past toward the Kreth bodies. Kian gripped Whisper's forearm. "Thanks," he said quietly. "We had each other's backs." Whisper stared at where his hand had been and nodded once. Kat spoke aloud. "Leave the craft attached. We'll examine it at port." Rael stepped forward. Still calm, still gentle. "We don't do this," he said, gesturing to the weapons in the Kreth. "We find another way." Kat turned. "What way?" She raised her voice. She didn't soften it. Rael had no answer. "Those two would have slaughtered everyone on board," Kat said, "without Kian and Whisper." Her voice rose further. "When you find that better way, tell me." Rael, without breaking his calm, replied, "Yes, Aina." Kat stared, shook her head, and walked to Kian and Whisper. Two tenders returned. They shook their heads. "There is nothing to tend here." "They do not leave echoes," one said quietly. "Only emptiness." Kat and Kian sat at separate consoles on the bridge. Kian scrolled slowly through files on his display. Whisper stood nearby, facing another screen. There were no Hrithi-sized chairs, so he remained on his feet, his weight shifting slightly as he read. He didn't seem bothered by it. Several tenders sat close by. Each spoke quietly, naming details and information from the records. Each entry was carefully noted on thin tablets. At first, Kian reacted to every familiar name. "I know him," he would say suddenly, pointing. "He was in my division, from Solace Station. Parents were Terran, so he joined. Originally from Eridani, I think." Other times, Whisper would stiffen. His feet would lift and lower rapidly in the careful tiptoe motion. He would point at the screen and make a low, whistling sound. Every name mattered. At first. But there were so many. Eventually, the emotion ebbed, not vanished, just worn thin by repetition. The tenders' care never wavered. Their diligence never softened. The data cores from the wrecked ships had been fully uploaded. The collector vessel followed known traffic patterns toward the nearest station with collector contacts. 2 systems, 20 days. Whisper clicked softly. A low sound followed, close to Kian. He was practicing. Kian answered absently. "Yeah." Whisper's pedipalps fluttered quickly. Rayan, always close to him, leaned in. "Kian? Whisper?" Kian blinked. He looked up, eyes distant from hours of concentration. "I heard him, yes." Then he smiled faintly at Whisper. "Good." Whisper's pedipalps fluttered again. He clicked and hummed softly. Rayan translated. "Whisper asks if you can find any files on why the Terran ships were in conflict with the Hrithi ships." Kian nodded. "I'll look. Is it important?" Whisper's pedipalps fluttered rapidly. His head dipped and rose. "Yes, very." "Okay," Kian said, already turning back to his screen. Rayan paused. He said, "Good. Yes." They spent the next days this way, reviewing, passing details to the tenders, cross-checking records. Kat drifted in and out, bringing drinks, sitting nearby, talking idly, or saying nothing at all. On the second day, she looked up. Contact at Epsilon Market and Trade Station confirmed, she said. Empty docking wing. Feeds off. 1700 local. Sinking now. One of the bridge clocks shifted. Local dockside, 1630. Kat murmured to herself. Good timing. She noticed Kian watching her. Most people don't like collectors, she said simply. We use traders who see past the stories. That bad? Kian asked. She nodded. Think of the worst things you believed when you first saw the ship. ×2. She looked away. Once off board, most tenders aren't recognized at all. People imagine bloody ghouls with cleavers and dripping aprons. Kian grimaced and felt guilty for ever believing it. The collector vessel eased into position. No markings, no name, nothing to track. Docking clamps engaged with soft clicks. The airlock opposite still held the scarred Kreth craft, clinging like a parasite. A corridor extended. Station access. 2 tenders moved down the passage. Between them floated a grav sled, covered, holding salvaged ship components and data cores. Kian followed them with his eyes. Kat noticed. They're trading coordinates, supplies, hull repairs, she said, getting those Kreth blaster scars removed. They shouldn't be recognized off-ship. Kian glanced toward the airlock. Whisper waited just inside. I'm sorry, Whisper, Kian said quietly. I don't think the station staff would know what to do with you. Next time, maybe. Kat gave him an odd look, then looked at Whisper. Whisper performed the Hrithi equivalent of a shrug. They walked together along the wide station promenade. Open space towered above them. A great viewport revealed the slow drift of stars. Support struts glowed and dimmed in cycles, marking time. They had arrived during twilight rotation. Lights were low. Stars and distant structures stood out sharply. Shops, restaurants, and markets lined the promenade, almost as if they were planet-bound. Kat glanced sideways at Kian. Have you answered your what now yet? Not yet, he said. I'm just taking one step at a time. She nodded. The coal... She stopped herself. The tenders will ask for help bringing their cargo home. Careful in public. You still have time to answer it. He nodded. What about you? She paused. There was a group of people on Earth, she said slowly. Maybe still are. The Japanese. Looked sort of like me. They had a saying. Death as light as a feather. Duty as heavy as a mountain. Kian listened. I made choices, she continued. Did things. Things that should have killed me. They saved a lot of people. The tenders found me in my ship's stasis pod. I shouldn't have lasted. They woke me. When I went home, everyone knew what I'd done. The duty attached to my name became the mountain. My feather was rejected. Here I am. She lifted her hands slightly. Kian frowned, trying to follow. How long? He asked quietly. She met his eyes. 1,000 years. He froze. All he could do was stare. Kat sniffed softly. Now you really are going to catch something out here. Her hand reached up and lightly brushed his cheek. Kian snapped his mouth shut, still stunned. I've never heard a story like that, he said, or of the Japanese. Different place, different time, Kat replied. That's why I like it here. Kian nodded. Back on the collector ship, Kat, Kian, Whisper, and the tenders gathered in the galley. They drank hot drinks quietly. Rayan stood before them, addressing both Terran and Hrithi. It was almost comical, his gestures and clicks flowing seamlessly into spoken Terran. "We now have coordinate maps," he explained, "for Terran and Hrithi space and for the proper homes of our wards. Terran space will be easier, with less resistance. Hrithi space will be more complicated." He gestured gently to Kian and Whisper, smiling. "With your help, our travel is made easier." He nodded and waited. Kian blinked. "Oh, that was a question." "Yes, I'll help." He looked at Whisper. Whisper fluttered his pedipalps and nodded. Rand didn't translate. He just smiled and nodded. Kian asked quietly, "So, how are we bringing them home? Are we finding families? Proper burial?" The tenders looked at one another, blankly. Kat paused. She wasn't sure how to answer. "What would happen," she said carefully, "if we tried to return bodies from a disaster their governments aren't even sure exists? From collectors, no less." She looked between them. "Both of you were dead without a trace. Neither government knows how it happened, or even where." Rayan translated for Whisper as she spoke. Kian glanced at Whisper. Whisper looked equally confused. Kian didn't yet know what confusion looked like in Hrithi. Kat continued, "Whisper, what did Hrithi records show about why they were in that sector?" Whisper shifted into the tiptoe posture. His feet moved rapidly, his head swayed, his tones sharpened. Whatever he was saying, it agitated him. Rayan repeated softly. "The Hrithi ships received communication from a reliable source. It claimed Terran forces were sending an occupation fleet to seize the sector, to apply pressure along the border." Kian stood abruptly. "The Terran transmission said the same about the Hrithi," he said. "Same times, same coordinates." Kat nodded. "Someone sent them there," she said quietly, "expecting them to find each other and react badly." She gestured faintly. "In a neutral system, limited relays, restricted communications." "What were the odds?" Kian asked. Then his voice hardened. "The Kreth knew," he said. "As soon as they entered the system, they knew where to look. The wreckage was dark. No emissions, no echoes." "The tenders found those first," he added. "But the Kreth saw it immediately. That debris field would have been invisible without exact coordinates." Kat exhaled slowly. "The question is why?" Silence. No one answered. She continued. "That's another reason we can't simply hand the bodies to governments. Too many secrets. Too much fear. They would reject the tenders. Reject the help." Rayan lifted his hand slightly, not asking permission, but not interrupting either. "The way of the tenders," he said, "is to release their people gently, to return them to their worlds." He spoke carefully now, more slowly, almost reverently. "We must find the dead quickly," he said. "There is a time before their essence separates." He paused. "If we arrive in time, we place them in stasis. We carry them home. If we arrive too late," his voice softened, "we can no longer find them. They are lost. They wander, hopeless. To die in space with no way home," he said, "is the greatest cruelty one being can visit upon another. We take those we can. We bring them to their worlds. We release them above their skies. They fall home. To continue." He finished speaking, then sat, as though he had just offered something sacred. Kian learned that every return followed an order. First, where the dead had belonged. If that was gone, then where their people still lived. If that was unreachable, then where their bodies would make sense. And only at the end, where they would simply rest. The collector ship departed Epsilon Station without ceremony. No announcements, no crowds, no curious onlookers. Just quiet separation from the docking arm and a gentle drift back into open space. Inside, preparations began almost immediately. The tenders reorganized storage bays, rechecked stasis fields, verified coordinates, recalibrated release trajectories. Everything was done slowly, deliberately, as if haste itself were disrespectful. Kian watched part of it from the bridge. He no longer asked questions about every step. He had learned when questions were welcome, and when silence was better. He also hadn't quite integrated all that Rain had told them, and he was a little afraid to ask more. He understood what Rain had said, or thought he did. Memories of the wraith he had seen, when he believed himself dead, surfaced unbidden. But the layers of meaning were overwhelming, and so very different from everything he had been taught. Whisper stood beside him, watching, thinking. After a long while, Kian spoke. "I wouldn't mind seeing Hrithi space," he said quietly. Whisper turned, his pedipalps stilled, then fluttered once, slow, careful. Rayan waited. Whisper made a series of low clicks and tones. Rayan translated. He says, "It would be dangerous." Kian frowned slightly. "For me?" Whisper clicked again, more softly. Rayan hesitated. He says, "Not only for you. He says he would like to show you. But you must understand, I am not like other Hrithi anymore." Kian absorbed that. Didn't argue, didn't joke. "I know," he said. Whisper studied him for a moment, then nodded. Later that cycle, Rain approached Kat in the galley. "There is something," he said gently. "The Kreth vessel." Kat looked up. "Yes?" "It was sold for salvage." "Yes." Rayan hesitated. "To whom?" Kat blinked, then frowned. "I don't know," she admitted. "A broker. Anonymous." "It was undesirable cargo." Rayan lowered his voice. "It carried markings. Drogrim." Kat's expression shifted. Slightly. Not recognition. Interest. "Does that mean something?" "Not yet," Rain said. "But it may." The first return would be Terran. After that, Hrithi, then others. World after world. Atmosphere after atmosphere. Sky after sky. Kian thought of what Rain had said. They fall home, and wondered how many people below ever knew. The collectors moved quietly deeper into Terran space. They relied on anonymity, not invisibility, just people choosing not to acknowledge their presence, combined with the discomfort of becoming involved in what they represented. If something official was needed, they used their Terran contacts. Silently, approval was granted by the few who knew the tender's true nature. The first world lay in the Tethys system, second planet. Caladan. An Earth-like atmosphere, familiar geology. Caladan was a farming world by Terran standards. Broad belts of green and tan, oceans broken by long island chains. a sky that made Kian's chest tighten with old memory. They docked at Caledon Station in an empty maintenance berth. A brief visit to administration followed. No paperwork, no registrations, no questions. They were cleared for orbital passage. The physical presence of the tenders was proof enough. Kian and Kat walked the station while clearance was finalized. Caledon Station smelled like metal, citrus cleaners, and baked grain, a place that fed ships, not stories. Kian was nervous about being recognized, about being found. Kat noticed. "It would be harder to prove you're alive," she said gently. "They'd suspect stolen identity first. It's too much work for them to recover your life." She touched his arm. "With my home, my name was known. They wanted the legend to be found. They wanted it to be true." He breathed out slowly, trusted her. They undocked as quietly as they had arrived, moved into low orbit. Caledon could have accepted all the Terran dead, but for the tenders, home was precise, personal, a return to memory. They assumed position. And with reverence, the shrouded bodies passed into atmosphere. Stasis systems were recovered, pods reused, nothing wasted. The second return was farther inward, through Varda, a dense, heavily monitored trade system whose gates were ringed with toll platforms and ship-counting arrays. Varda's primary station, Keel Point, was all lights and warnings, a place that didn't trust anyone and recorded everything anyway. It was the kind of system where you could be anonymous. If no one wanted to look closely, they didn't dock. They didn't need to. Clearance came through a contact who never showed their face. A single packet. A single corridor assigned. A narrow slice of orbit that kept them above night-side cloud. The bodies fell home. No one cheered. No one chased. Varda swallowed them and moved on. The third return took them to the Eridani system. Kian didn't speak when he saw the designation on the navigation slate. Eridani was a place where Terrans and near-Terrans mixed. Old colonial roots, old station lineages, old grudges softened by distance. One of the release worlds was a cold ocean planet with scattered floating cities, its atmosphere a pale blue-gray bruise under the sun. Kian watched the storm bands roll beneath them. He pictured a name, a face, a person who would never see that sky again. Rayan said nothing. The tenders moved as carefully as if each body were glass. They fell home. The fourth return was the farthest out, the Halcyon Reach system, a border system with a reputation for self-reliance. Its station, Anchorwake, was built around an old shipyard frame that had never been dismantled, just repurposed until it became architecture. Everything there looked bolted together by people who expected help to arrive late, or not at all. Kat kept her head down. Kian kept his mouth shut. Even whispers stayed deeper in the ship. And still, the tenders received their permission. A door opened, a corridor cleared, an orbit granted, home returned. Ritual complete. The Terran return took 4 weeks. Hrethi space lay 3 weeks beyond. Normally, it would have passed in silence. Routine, maintenance, observation, return. But this passage was different. At first, it was subtle, a shift in the feeds. One carried public news, open communications, and status reports. Another carried the collector network, ship movements, internal reports, and cooperative contacts who knew the tenders were not ghouls. Kreth encounters appeared more frequently. Raider movements where none had been before. Outposts reporting pursuits. Disappearances, no proof. No declarations, just a pattern. Kian noticed first, because he had learned to watch. "Do you think—" he began. Stopped. Rand followed his gaze. "I think we are seeing what was always there," Rand said, "and what has recently grown." 2 days later, the report arrived. A collector vessel. Missing. No beacon. No signal. No distress call. It had been returning from a Kravik colony ship disaster. Thousands in stasis. All dead. Coordinates filed. Course plotted. And then, nothing. They reviewed the data. Trajectory. Velocity. Transmission logs. Nothing unusual. What was absent mattered more. "No essence trace," Rain said. "No resonance wake. No residual field." Kian frowned. "That's bad?" Rayan nodded. "Ships leave impressions. Even after destruction, something remains. This left nothing." Silence followed. Space was vast. Some lost vessels took decades to find. Others were never found. But collectors could sense living and recent essence. Disappearances were rare, usually accidents, storms, magnetic phenomena, occasionally hostile action, but always something lingered. This had not. It was as if the ship had never existed. Kat listened, then said quietly, "We should look for it." Rand stiffened. "That corridor is unstable." It was known as the Sable Corridor, a neutral transit belt between Terran and Hrithi space, a place of treaties and caution, designed to prevent conflict by giving ships a way to pass without passing through anyone's territorial space. It was also a place where patrols were thin, where help took time, where a ship could vanish and be recorded only as a missing line in a ledger. Whisper clicked. Kian hesitated. "It could be dangerous." "Yes," Kat said, "which is why we should go." She looked at them. "If something can erase a collector ship, it can do it again. And if we are nearby, it is harder to hide." Rand considered. Finally, he inclined his head. "Yes, Aina." Whisper echoed it. Kian followed. "Yes, Aina." The course bent gradually, not sharply. Directed to divert through the Sable Corridor before entering Hrithi space by a different gate chain. Close enough to observe, eyes on sensors to give early warning. They continued their work. Everything was watched. Logged, cross-checked, reviewed, collector network informed. Kreth movements grew clearer. They were searching. Kian felt it, a tightening, a listening quiet. 3 weeks stretched, and somewhere ahead, along forgotten coordinates, a collector ship had vanished. Without trace, without witness, without permission. After 3 weeks, they reached the neutral junction system where the Kravik wreck had first been discovered, the Kesserine Junction. A system that existed for one reason, to connect routes. No major worlds, no proud capitals. Just a chain of stations built around the largest gate lattice in the sector, each one named like a practical warning. Span 9, Cold Harbor, Warden Ring. Gate to gate, they followed the long highway of stations and minor planets that made up Kesserine's traffic spine. Everything about it felt temporary. Even the lights, even the rules. They had good coordinates for the Kravik wreckage. It still took a week to find. Not because the data was wrong, because space made mockery of nearby. As they approached the coordinates, they began to see debris, not meteoric, not natural, cold metal, shattered truss, frozen vapor blooms that had long since dissipated into nothing, except where the fragments still caught light. They followed the trail, toward what remained of the colony ship. The tenders sent drones first. No signals, no patterns, no emissions, just visual feeds, hour after hour. Then Whisper rose. The tiptoe motion returned, fast and precise, pedipalps fluttering. Rayan was beside him instantly. Whisper had found a backup data core, cold, unpowered, missed by the earlier salvage. They retrieved it. They searched another full cycle. The wreck was confirmed, and they had one possible clue. The recovered core returned to the ship. Whisper and Rain took it to a workstation. Whisper proved unexpectedly proficient with the electronics. Not just capable, fast, intuitive, skills from his old life coming back to use. While they worked, the collector ship moved down the missing vessel's cold path. Through the next gate, along the sable corridor, into the sector where the ship had vanished. They arrived at the last known location and drifted along the reported vector. Drones deployed again, widening the ship's sensor range, increasing resolution, searching, not knowing what they were looking for. Whisper and Rain managed to power the core, uploaded what remained. The hardest part was translating Kravik data into something readable. There were no Kravik specialists aboard. Again, Whisper bridged the gap, finding patterns, matching references, mapping symbols into meaning. That evening, they gathered in the galley to hear what the dead ship had to say. Whisper stood and addressed the group. Gestures, foot motions, low sounds, pedipalps fluttering and pointing as if he could draw the truth out of air. Rayan translated. "We have the Kravik record. They were attacked. Kreth came aboard. They killed survivors. And then they left." Kat's eyes narrowed. "They took nothing?" Rayan shook his head. "No stripping. No salvage. No seizure. Only killing." He hesitated. As the ship died, the last scan detected the missing collector vessel arriving. It recovered the dead survivors and salvageable tech, and departed. Rayan's voice lowered. And then, the wreck was disturbed again. We know our patterns for recovery. Something came after and disturbed them. Search patterns. Careful. Deliberate. After the collector ship was gone, Kian spoke slowly, thinking out loud. Sounds like the Kreth came back to find something they expected to be there. He gestured toward Whisper. Like our wrecks. He looked at Kat. We should tune every feed to flag Kreth activity, especially Draugrim. Kat nodded once, like a decision that had already been made. The collector ship made its slow drift along its missing sister ship's last recorded vector. It was long work, slow work. But the tenders were patient, very patient. A week into the search, nothing had changed. Their methods remained meticulous. Layered scans, repeated sweeps, careful recalculations. They were searching for their own, for their fellow tenders. If they could not find them alive, then they would find them dead and bring them home. For them, a fallen survivor was as important as a living one. Both deserved return. Kat, Whisper, and Kian were not as patient. They did not understand waiting as a virtue, so they looked for ways to fight the boredom. They gathered in the galley, as they often did, with Rain nearby, as he always was when Whisper moved through the ship. Kian studied the other two for a moment, then said, "We need a ship." Kat laughed. "Yes, we do. Were you planning on growing one? Or do you have hidden riches from your old life?" He sighed. "I didn't say I could get one. I said we need one." Then he added, "What about the great Catalan Reyes? She should be able to get one easily." Kat's expression darkened. She stepped forward and slugged him hard on the shoulder. Kian winced and rubbed the spot. "That's not funny," she said, "and my home is far away." Whisper watched quietly, observing, learning, saying nothing. Kat exhaled. "But we do need a ship. We're risking this one too much." All three turned toward Rain. "We seek higher ways," he said calmly. "What you ask does not." "Then tell us," Kat replied. "Tell us your higher way solution." Rain only watched her, serene, unmoved. "Well, when your higher ways figure out how to confront the Kreth, we'll use them," she said. "Until then, we need a ship, one that can protect this one." "Yes, Ina," Rand said. "We will inform our contact." Kat held her stern expression for another moment. Then it broke. She smiled, stepped forward, and hugged him. Rand froze. For the first time, Kian and Whisper saw a crack in a tender's serenity. Rand stiffened, made an uncertain sound, his limbs hovering uselessly. Then he squawked, indignant and flustered, "Ina!" Whisper finally spoke. He rose, making careful gestures with his pedipalps, arms, and legs, accompanied by low sounds. Rayan watched closely, translating only when needed. Whisper pointed to the data display and terminal, then to himself. "These were part of my old life," Rayan translated. "The purpose I was born to." Whisper indicated the faint blue tones in his coloring, then the dark banding along his limbs. "Hrithi purpose marks." Then he turned and pointed to Kian. "I will follow you," Rayan said quietly. "I will fight as you do. With you. I will learn." Kat's expression softened. She stepped forward and hugged Whisper. He handled it better than Rain, still uncomfortable, still unsure. But after a moment, he looked down at her and slowly returned the hug with all four arms. Kian watched them and smiled. The first sign was not visual, it was structural, a distortion in reflected scans, a shape where there should have been only emptiness, a symmetry that space did not produce on its own. A pale mass resolved itself from the darkness. A ship, clean white hull, intact, dim and shadowed. Adrift in silence. Whisper noticed first, then the sensors confirmed it. The missing sister ship lay ahead of them, rotating slowly along its last recorded vector. No running lights, no emissions, no active fields, electronically dead. They approached with care. Drones deployed in widening arcs, every system alert, every sensor sharpened. No response, no warnings, no automated defenses, nothing. They brought the ship into close proximity and ran passive scans. The hull was intact. No breach, no explosive damage, no structural failure. It had not been destroyed. It had been emptied. Kat stared at the display. "Where are the bodies?" No one answered. They boarded slowly and carefully, prepared for traps that never came and resistance that did not exist. Inside, the corridors were clean, too clean. No scorch marks, no ruptured panels, no decompression scars. Only faint traces of movement, boot impressions, dragged lines, disturbed dust. The living spaces were empty. The stasis bays were empty. The medical compartments were empty. Every tender was gone. Every recovered body was gone. Only the infrastructure remained, silent, waiting. They found the data core in the central archive. Cold, offline, shielded, intact. Whisper and Rain worked together to restore power. Minimal, localized, just enough. The core responded. They copied everything, every log, every backup, every fragment. When the transfer completed, they gathered in the galley. No one spoke. The first playback was procedural, routine. The missing ship's recovery of the Kravik colony vessel. Visual feeds showed drifting wreckage, cracked hull, frozen debris. Inside, thousands of colonists in stasis. All dead, killed in their pods. No warning, no struggle. Systematic. The tenders worked without comment and without hesitation. They restored damaged fields, stabilized failing systems, repaired pods where possible. They logged every individual, every name, every origin, every destination. Then came the transfer, one by one. Carefully, reverently, the dead were prepared to fall home. Then the tone changed. Long-range sensors detected another vessel. Kreth, Drawgrim clan. They followed, silent, persistent, waiting, through the gate into the neutral corridor, still following. On a cue only they understood, the demand came. Rand translated quietly. They declare salvage rights. They declare dominance. They intend to board. The tenders debated briefly. There was no alternative. They granted permission. The Kreth latched on with mechanical precision. Clamps engaged. Airlocks sealed. They entered without urgency, without caution, as if they already owned the ship. They walked, observed, commented, then they killed. No warning, no demands, no negotiation. The first tender fell from a shot in the back, the second as she turned, the third while shielding a pod. It was not combat. It was execution. The feeds multiplied, corridors, compartments, every angle. The Kreth moved methodically, professionally, stun weapons when bodies were needed, lethal weapons when they were not. They gathered the fallen, placed them in pods, sealed them, stacked them beside the Kravik dead. Then they stripped everything: pods, remains, equipment, drones, auxiliary systems. Anything useful, anything valuable, anything exploitable. The ship was emptied of meaning, of purpose, of memory. The final feed showed shutdowns, life support, navigation, sensors, lighting, darkness spreading compartment by compartment until one camera remained. It showed the last Kreth to leave. He paused, looked into the lens. Larger than the others, better armored, marked, weapons customized, maintained. The others deferred to him, waited for his signal. He studied the camera, then reached out and severed it. Silence followed. Kat's hands were clenched on the table, white-knuckled. Kian stared at nothing, jaw tight. Whisper was utterly still. Rain closed his eyes. When he opened them, his voice was quiet. They were taken, all of them, returned to nothing. Kat's voice was steady, barely. That wasn't salvage. That was harvesting. And now, Kian said, we know who's doing it. And somewhere beyond their sensors, the Drawgrim were moving again. No one suggested pursuit. Not yet. There were still duties unfinished. Rand spoke first. We must complete the Hrithi return. Their dead are waiting. Kat nodded reluctantly. We finished the work. We still need more information, and we don't need to risk them, she said, pointing toward the cargo hold. Then we go to our contacts, and we find a ship. Rayan inclined his head. Yes, Aina. Then, after a pause, he added calmly, We have upgraded our request. No one asked what that meant. They resumed course, turning inward toward Hrithi territory. Rain handled all clearances himself. He spoke in flowing Hrithi tones, formal, precise, layered with meanings the others could not hear. Responses came almost immediately. Routes were approved. Navigation windows opened. Gate sequences aligned. No delays, no negotiations, no questions. They were waved through. Whisper noticed first. His pedipalps twitched in confusion. He approached Rain quietly, gestured, questioned. Rain listened, then translated. He asks why we are not stopping, why there are no station visits, no local coordination, no ceremonial exchanges. They know who we are, Rain answered simply. They know why we come. They will not interfere. Whisper absorbed that in silence. For the first time, he realized how deep the collector's reach truly was. The Hrithi return passed in near continuous motion, world to world, atmosphere to atmosphere, sky to sky. No stations, no pauses, only descent, release, recovery, and departure. Near the final return, Kian spoke quietly. I have a request. Kat looked at him. Go ahead. Before the next release, he said, Can we wait? Rayan tilted his head. Wait? I'm not sure how long. Not very, Kian replied. Observe. It won't hurt if I'm wrong. Rayan considered, then nodded. Yes. They held position above the final world. The shrouded forms lay in their pods, motionless, still. Stasis fields slowly degraded. Minutes passed, then hours. No one spoke. They sat in the darkness of the cargo hold, all lights off, with only the barest glow from the port windows. Then it began. At first it was subtle, a shimmer, a distortion in the air above the pods, like heat rising from cold metal. Then shapes formed, faint, translucent, humanoid, not entirely, wraiths. They rose slowly from the bodies, one by one. Dozens, hundreds, silent, weightless. They circled the viewing chamber. If one moved too close to the faint light from the viewport, it would momentarily disappear, then reappear when only darkness lay behind, as if orienting themselves, as if remembering. Kat's breath caught. Whisper froze. Rayan whispered something in Hrithi, a prayer. The wraiths drifted together, then moved, passing through bulkheads, through hull plating, through shields, leaving no mark. They vanished into the void. Silence returned. No alarms, no disturbances, nothing measurable, only absence. Kat turned slowly to Kian. You knew. He nodded. I suspected it when I thought I was dead. They go. Eventually. They just need time. Rayan regarded him with new understanding. So that is why, he said softly. Even in death, they fall home. The ship resumed its course, toward Terran space, toward new allies, toward new dangers, and toward a war that would no longer remain unseen. The tenders, once the transfer was complete, and all the Hrithi dead had passed home, turned for the first time to those who had not. They tended to the empty Hrithi bodies and released them into the atmosphere, not carelessly. Tenders were never careless, but with less solemnity, as if they could feel the difference, as if an empty body carried less weight. Perhaps they could. They had known that the Kreth were empty. As the ship rose from the Hrithi world's atmosphere, it set course for Asterion, a frontier system. Rayan stood near the navigation display. "Verge Point Station is the best place to get what we need," he said, glancing at Kat. "It is in the Asterion system, under the star of the same name, one of the 4 systems governed by Dawn Reach Star." Whisper studied the navigation overlay in silence. Then his pedipalps shifted. Rayan watched him closely, translating carefully, checking each phrase against Whisper's posture and tone. "They use the same word," Rayan said slowly. Kat glanced over. "For what?" "For the star," Whisper replied through Rayan. "And then again, for authority. The syntax is confusing." Kian smiled faintly. "Yeah, Terrans. It's deliberate," Kat added. "It's supposed to be poetic." Whisper paused. "Poetic?" "They mean the star on the Republic symbol," she explained. "Each one represents a sector, a star of responsibility. So the system becomes the star," Kian said, "and the government becomes the symbol." He pulled up an image on his tablet and turned it toward Whisper. A stylized star, surrounded by 14 small circles. "The stars on the Republic's emblem," he said. "Each one stands for a governing system." Whisper considered this. They confused themselves intentionally. "Pretty much," Kat agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What is poetic?" No one answered. Console lights reflected softly against the viewport. After a few seconds, Kian cleared his throat and changed the subject. The collector ship continued back toward Terran space through the neutral corridor into the Asterion system and toward Verge, the second planet in the system. Located in the habitable zone, Verge had never been naturally livable. It had been shaped by decades of terraforming. Now, after many years, it had strong foundations and was entering a new golden era. They were bound for Verge Point Station. Collector tender contacts were expecting their arrival. Private docking, under the guise of routine maintenance, was arranged quickly and quietly, with as little visibility as possible. The tenders made their way to station authority to handle their affairs. Kat, Kian, and this time Whisper made their way into the station. A Hrithi enclave on a nearby moon made Whisper's presence accepted. He still drew looks. Curiosity, interest, but not alarm. Rare, not unheard of. Rayan had prepared a tablet for Whisper, the first of its kind. It did not translate Terran. Whisper already understood enough of that. Instead, it allowed him to enter Hrithi meanings and receive clear Terran equivalents, displayed or spoken through its speakers. Their first real freedom after months of shipboard life, and the first step into something new. As they entered the main concourse, a massive vidscreen flashed in bright letters and shifting colors. "Welcome to Verge Point Station. Dawn's Reach Star. The new dawn of the Republic." Whisper chittered softly, his feet moving in quick, excited steps. He held up the tablet Rain had given him. On the screen, in clear Terran script, were 2 simple words. "I understand." They continued down the promenade, Kat and Kian sharing a private smile as Whisper led the way, suddenly free to be curious. They came to a vendor selling whole animals, uncut, unportioned, nearly intact, not carved into selected cuts, not prepared for display, food in its original form. Whisper paused, then looked at Kat and Kian, almost sheepishly, if that were possible. He pointed, seeking approval. They nodded. Kian transferred credits from the account Rayan had provided. The vendor gestured toward a private eating space. Whisper disappeared inside. Kat and Kian exchanged a glance. Finally, Kian said quietly. Real food. Only then did they realize what Whisper had been living on. They sent a brief message to his tablet and turned away, heading in search of real food of their own. For the first time in months, they were no longer passengers. They were no longer sheltered. They were standing on the edge of something new. Later, they gathered with Rain. He gave the three of them a ship merchant's address. We cannot do this for you, he said gently. We have no knowledge of these things. They can also obtain supplies for you. He bowed. Ina, we must depart and say our goodbyes. He nodded solemnly. You will have access to our feeds and may communicate freely with us, but any further help would go against our ways. He looked at Whisper. We will give you the location of the Terran Hrithi enclave if you wish. You are all welcome back when it does not go against our ways. Ina, be well. We will take you to your home when you are ready, if you are ready. Kian glanced curiously at Kat, at the implication that the tenders could take her home as if she could not do so herself. Rayan bowed once more and departed. Whisper, Kat, and Kian left the ship, looking back as they went, wondering if they would ever see it again. They made their way to the merchant. The merchant greeted them warmly. In a conspiratorial tone, he said, We have some ships already identified for you. Our friends, emphasizing the word, gave us some ideas, but I think I know what you really need. Come. He showed them a monitor with various ships. Any of these fit what our friends asked for, he said, but the last is what I think you're truly looking for. At cost. We can't stay open and keep serving for less. He looked almost guilty. They focused on the last entry, a military corvette class, recently replaced by a newer model, still widely used. Kat frowned. How is this available? He shrugged. It's coded for civilian sale. We just forgot to remove the armaments. Accidents happen. Kian nodded. We'll need outfitting and supplies. He looked at Whisper. And fresh Hrithi food, arms and armor, light infantry gear. Kat added, 3 sets. The merchant nodded, unsurprised. I can supply that, even Hrithi items, but your best bet is the enclave, better quality, less cost. He smiled faintly. I thought that's what you'd want. It'll be ready in a few hours. Hours later, they stood before a large ship, Terran military gray, markings removed, civilian designation painted over, clearly ex-military. The dorsal turret was the only unusual feature. Inside, they inspected their compartments. The galley with processors and fresh ingredient equipment. The bridge with a wide viewport. 2 pilot chairs side by side, 2 more behind. Navigation and sensor consoles integrated. Kat powered up the systems. I can fly this. AI, status? I am Phoenix AI. I may be renamed if desired. Kat looked at Kian and Whisper. No. Phoenix is perfect. Report status. Full operational capacity. No civilian modifications detected. Shall I configure for civilian use? No, all three said together. How soon until departure? 15 minutes. Cat nodded. Set course for the Hrithi Enclave. Affirmative. The Enclave lay on a massive moon orbiting Asterian's third planet. Barren, thin, toxic atmosphere. No surface cities, only a sprawling spaceport. They docked under sealed protocols, pressurized corridors, automated inspection, contained transit, everything controlled. Beneath the surface lay the Hrithi world, a vast cavern network, sealed, warm, alive. Bioluminescent growth traced the walls. Terraced fungal gardens and livestock paddocks filled the chambers. Pools of nutrient solution reflected blue light. Agricultural towers rose from stone platforms. Hrithi food, Hrithi air, Hrithi rhythm, balanced, sustained. They exported food to Hrithi worlds, traded Terran materials, everything legal, everything discreet due to tensions between the species. Unique, valued by both sides. Before docking fully, Whisper slowed. His posture shifted. Cat noticed. Something wrong? He typed. This is not spoken of. With outsiders. Pause. I feel them. The many. The thinking together. The remembering. The becoming. The hive, Cat said softly. Yes, Whisper replied. They know I am here. They were greeted by Hrithi at the terminal. Unified, coordinated, graceful. Their speech flowed like motion, patterned, living. It's like a dance, Kian whispered. Beautiful, Cat agreed. Whisper joined them, mirrored them, matched rhythm, circling in patterns. Afterward, he turned back. The tablet spoke warmly. They will help us. A black Hrithi stepped forward, red-banded, broad, still. They exchanged words, departed together. Security type, Kian murmured. Rain planned this well, Cat said. He always does. Whisper returned armored, black composite plates, 2 weapons, purpose-built. Nice, Cat said. We should not stay long, Whisper typed. Why? My thinking is different now. Integration takes time. This is fast. Unstable. For now, we are welcome to return. Together or apart. That last detail mattered. They left quietly. Phoenix lifted. The moon fell away. Think we'll come back? Cat asked. Whisper nodded. When the time is right. Phoenix accelerated, leaving safety behind, carrying them forward, toward purpose, toward consequence, toward what came next.